Right.
Now, yeah. So training camps into week 3, preseason football into week 1, and we're going to get to see some starters for, 1 or 2 series. Some teams won't even play starters, saving them, of course, for the regular season, or they got niggling injuries, or they don't want to put them in a position where they're going to get hurt. Of course, fantasy players interested in some of the rookies on show, trying to find that potentially hidden gem that they can take into their drafts. And people like us, well, we're going to read way too much into the preseason results. Get you all hyped up for the season. All right, let's welcome in our 2-time Super Bowl champion, Bryant McFadden. We're going to talk underrated players entering the 2022 season with BMAC. BMAC's going to count down his top 3. So, BMAC, let's start at number 3. Who do you have as your 3rd most underrated player going into this season?
Yo, Jeremy, this was a very difficult task for me because there are so many underappreciated, underrated players in the National Football League. But for me, my 3rd guy, when you look at my list and look at the expectations based on what they've done so far in their professional career, along with having a potential huge year this season, I start with DJ Moore. Talented wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. The reason why I have him on my list as one of my underrated players is because he's been productive. He's been productive playing the wide receiver position for the Carolina Panthers when inconsistency has been a common theme for them at the quarterback position. Over a year ago, over 1,100 yards, 93 receptions, 4 touchdowns. If you look at his numbers over the last 3 seasons, right, 3,525 yards receiving. He's been a productive player with inconsistency coming from the quarterback position. So one would think if they can find a little more structure at the quarterback position, DJ Moore's numbers will increase dramatically. I mean, when you look at the wide receivers, we know it's a lot of stars at that position. But when you see DJ Moore's name in the same category with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, and Justin Jefferson, that tells you how prolific he's been. But all the guys that were on that list had the opportunity to work with good quarterbacks, more consistent quarterbacks than what DJ Moore has had so far there in Carolina. But yet and still, he's balled out. And because of that, he's my 3rd most underrated player.
93 receptions, 163 targets last year, as you mentioned, over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns, and of course, they are at the Commanders on Saturday afternoon as they kick off their preseason. All right, number 2 on the list. We were having a little bit of a debate about this in the newsroom. Somebody asked the question, who is the top receiver in this particular division, the AFC South, and he's number 2 on your list, BMAC. Who is it?
Brandon Cooks. You talked about potential one of the best wide receivers in the AFC South, but no one is talking about Brandon Cooks. I was so shocked and amazed when I looked at what he's been able to do the last 2 years there for the Texans. Shocked. How has Brandon Cooks been so successful? In 2020, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. Last year in 2021, 1,037 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, he's balled out, but then you look at who's throwing him the football. Heck, you might as well say I've been throwing him the football in Jeremy. Now, granted, Davis Mills, I think he has a bright future, but yet and still, most rookie quarterbacks struggle, especially if you were not a high drafted player. But Brandon Cooks has balled out. And the thing about Brandon Cooks, throughout his professional career, he's an 8-year vet. He's only fell short of 1,000 yards receiving 2 times in his professional career. And one time was his rookie campaign when he wasn't quite a starter just yet. But since becoming a starter in the National Football League, everywhere he's been, New England, the Saints, the Rams, and now the Houston Texans, Brandon Cooks has balled out. And like you said, you had that argument, that debate. Who is the best wide receiver in the AFC South? If you wanted to say Brandon Cooks, I'm okay with that because he's balled out. But if you look at his quarterbacks that he's had the luxury of catching passes from compared to some of the other wide receivers in that division, he's been asked to do a lot, and he's been able to do so. And because of that, similar to my argument in regards to DJ Moore, big-time numbers not coming from a household name-like player at the quarterback position, but yet and still the production hasn't slipped at all. Brandon Cooks is my number 2 guy.
And you look at that target share, too. 134 targets, 90 receptions last season. And BMAC, when looking at fantasy, man, this is a guy that pops up on a lot of lists of players that are underrated that you should be looking at going into this season. They, of course, open their preseason versus the Saints on Saturday night. Number 1 on the list. BMAC, this is an interesting one for me that you have this particular guy at the top of your list. You could say possibly he's been underrated for a number of years now. Who is number 1?
Derrick Carr. clearly he's been getting slept on for quite some time, especially this year. I don't care where you go. I don't care what restaurant you're eating in. I don't care where you're getting your hair cut or done at. If you had football talk, you talk about football quarterbacks in the AFC, no one is throwing out Derrick Carr's name. If you talked about quarterbacks in the AFC West, no one is throwing out Derrick Carr's name. But one thing Derrick Carr has been throwing out, big-time numbers. I mean, last year, the last 2 seasons, 8,970 yards throwing, 50 touchdowns. The last 2 seasons alone. That completion percentage has been so steady for him. Steady Eddie is what I should call Derrick Carr, because he's been steady when it comes to completion percentage. He's been steady when it comes to being productive, and no one is giving him his just due. Right now, you talk about the quarterbacks. I understand they got a lot of stars in the AFC West, but everyone said Derrick Carr is he's not even in the neighborhood as those guys. 10-7 last year, got into the playoffs, 1 possession away from beating the Cincinnati Bengals. Derrick Carr has been a prolific contributor for the Raiders, but no one is giving him his just due. No one is giving him his flowers. No one is giving him any respect. I'm giving him all right now. He is my #1 most underrated player in the National Football League. It's my list. Take it or leave it.
Top 5 quarterback in the NFL last season, Derrick Carr. 28 touchdowns, 14 interceptions.
Top 5, number-wise, no one is talking about him. I mean, I heard people say he's not even a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League.
They play the Vikings on Sunday as they open up their preseason. 2-time Super Bowl champion Bryant McFadden giving us his top 3 underrated players for 2022.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.